should have it on there. Not on there. Should be on there. Let's find out why it should be on there.
Sleeping location of the mother from these fields that are statistical differentiation of the recover are the ones that follow exactly this set of instructions. It is hardly done with the vitamins and with the other things that we do with the behavioral therapies. They have a minor effect on it. The moment we protect the sleeping location of the child, the autistic children are recovering. Now, I can say that with great levels of certainty now for two reasons. One, because I have a large group of people that follow my teaching in Europe, and the Europeans, when they hear that, they get the idea and run with it. In America, unfortunately, especially the husbands have become a huge obstacle to this. Most American men never had more than 1 year of physics in school and simply do not have the understanding, but they have strong opinions without ever having understood physics. They have strong opinions about it that this possibly cannot be true, because if it would be true and dangerous, the government would have done something. Well, you make up your own opinion after watching this film. So what we did then is a study where we took 10 autistic children and went back to the sleeping location where the mother was when she was pregnant with that child, and compared it with the sleeping location of a mother that gave birth to healthy children. We had 10 mothers in that group, 10 mothers in this group. And in the group of the autistic children, we found that the measurements that we got for the microwave exposure in the sleeping location of where the mother was when she was pregnant with her child was elevated compared to the group of children that were normal. The same measurement we got by measuring body voltage. This is the exposure just to the ambient field, electric field in the home created by the electric wires in the wall. Found the same number, that the exposure, that the electric charge that is built up in the body was by the factor of 10 times more in the sleeping location where the mother was sleeping when she was pregnant with her child. And with that, the exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields has become the first factor that could be isolated ever in autism that could predict autism. I can go to the home of a pregnant mother now, take those measurements, and give her a reasonable assessment what her chances are to give birth to a child that will later be diagnosed as autistic. Now, as you can imagine, I was not able to publish the study. Nobody was interested. There was 10 children, was too small a group to say something, even though the differences are so dramatic that even the 10 children led to a huge statistical difference. But I wasn't able to publish it because of the special interests that are now have found their way into the medical journals and the peer-reviewed journals. I think it's important to say that now the communications industry has become the largest lobbying industry in politics, larger than big pharma. In fact, by a factor of 3 times more powerful than the pharmaceutical industry, which used to be the most powerful arm, bending the decisions in Washington and in all Western governments for that purpose. So we weren't surprised when I wasn't able to publish this data, but it made us even more aware of the fact that we need what is called preconception healthcare. If somebody is planning on becoming pregnant, moms and dads need to know this information, that they have to protect the sleeping location of the mother from these fields that are absolutely tweaking the epigenome and the genes of the fetus that grows in there, predicting that this child will never reach its true genetic potential later in life because these early exposures. So one of the points I'm trying to make here is, if a fetus is exposed to microwave from cell phone radiation or from ambient man-made fields in the house, the fetus is affected by a factor of hundreds times stronger than a fully grown-up brain, even though it's not harmless for the grown-up brain, but the damage is somewhat contained. And so we have what I call nighttime technologies to protect people, which is the most important time. At nighttime, all the fuses have to be off. That means those fuses also switch off the breaker switch, also switches off the wireless internet, it switches off all telephone support systems, it switches off your alarm systems, which are equally bad. It switches off everything, every appliance inside the house. It probably does not switch off the smart meter. Now, we've had some smart meters that were on the same electric system that you could actually switch off with the fuses, and others you couldn't. It's at nighttime. You also need the protection from the incoming cell phone radiation. And for my patients, we do the earthing pad, where we carefully test out where we earthing it, where we grounding the wire that comes off that. So that's the most important part for the nighttime. Now then there is daytime technologies. Admittedly, at daytime, most people need the electric system on. So the first thing that we do, we use the Stetzer filters, which have been shown to be effective biologically, that there is less biological stress in the people that are in a room that has the Stetzer filters in the outlets. Now, Stetzer filters reduce the dirty electricity. I know Graham Stetzer has gotten a lot of opposition from that, but Mark de Havas, professor in Canada, has shown very clearly that the Stetzer filter reduce the biological damage that the fields are doing to us. Now, during the daytime, it is not allowed to have cordless phones in the house. That frequency, is to kind of make that point maybe clearer, a German mathematician has calculated the energy delivery. When you have 2 rooms over, you have the little space station for the cordless phone with a little antenna, and you go in the bedroom 2 rooms away. The field strength that you're getting when you're sleeping there is equivalent as if you had a 737 Boeing jet engine running at full speed next to your pillow next to you. The sound and the energetics of it are the same as if you have a silent, quiet, cordless phone in the kitchen. It's absolutely destructive to the human health, and probably amongst all the things that we're discussing, the smart meter is number 1 now in terms of devastation to our system, but the cordless phone is number 2. It's worse than the incoming cell phone tower radiation. And so daytime technology, people are not allowed to have wireless internet in the house. It is a huge source of electropollution and of high frequency fields. They're not allowed to have a cordless phone. We paying careful attention now to the energy saving light bulbs. They also give off high frequency radiation that's devastating to the health. So my patients have to go back to use the traditional incandescent light bulbs, which are now available on the internet as heat lamps. But they're the same light bulbs, it has become instantly more expensive because they're now a rare item, or they have to pay more money and get LED lights into the house. But as a daytime technology, the new energy-saving light bulbs, the compact fluorescent lights, and completely unacceptable technology. It gives both high-frequency wavelengths that are devastating to the brain, plus it's mercury vapor-based, and the frequency of mercury piggybacks on the light and makes people toxins in the body that are then swishing around, finding, the body stores mercury and other toxins in places where it causes the least damage. The compact fluorescents stir that up, and the mercury gets displaced now into the brain, into the spinal cord, into the hormone-producing glands, and it's devastating. So daytime technology, no wireless inside the house, go back to broadband. No cordless phones, go back to corded phones. Or there is one type of phone that you can buy that is innocent. It's just much more expensive. And no compact fluorescent lights in the house. It's a good start for most people.
Apologies. Thank you very much for your indulgence here. My name is Tracy Quint. I am the representative from House District 8. I represent 47 communities, and they're actually in Aroostook, Washington, and Penobscot counties. So I'm pretty spread out. And so I'm not an expert on what you all will be hearing about from me today, and that's why I've come to your committee. And so we have Senator Lawrence and esteemed colleagues and friends. I would just like to present LD 697, which tasks the University of Maine with investigating the effects of so-called 5G technology on bird, bee, and insect populations and long-term effects on children. My young adult children and many constituents brought this issue to my attention when they learned that there are questions of biological harm from today's wireless technology. When I looked into it, I discovered that the state of Maine has no science-based technology safety information, to provide to the public. As some of you are aware, I've been a registered nurse for 25 years. So I looked for the science and I was surprised by what I did not know. So that's something that when we're in the nursing field, we always look for scientific information. And I was surprised truly that our state did not have this available. When I went to find this information from our state, I had to look to other states for leadership in this category. And so that was rather disappointing to me. And so I would like our state to take the lead. That's what this bill is about. I would like to discuss the science and risks. Let me start with the environmental studies. I have learned that the Earth's, much of this probably will be duplication of what you already know, but this is what I learned, so I do want to share it. I have learned that the Earth's natural electromagnetic field, which is meant to regulate the electrical systems of all living cells, pulses just 7.83 times per second. That is measured in hertz. Currently, our wireless signals carry our data back and forth using man-made microwaves at a pulse 1,000,000 times per second in the megahertz range and 1,000,000,000 times per second in the gigahertz range. Again, the Earth pulses at just 7 times per second. Invisible man-made radiation constantly overpowers that. Our birds, bees, and pollinators have built-in navigation systems that are meant to be synchronized with the Earth's electromagnetic field. That's how they get back and forth to their nests and hives. The science shows the increasing electropollution is dysregulating their navigation systems. 4G or fourth generation technology uses long waves to carry data and signals. 5G or fifth generation uses these longer waves too, but is now adding an additional layer of short millimeter waves that are about the same size as many of our pollinators. Studies show these man-made frequencies are a leading cause of bee colony collapse.
First of all, I want to thank the representatives and I want to thank this esteemed group for putting this meeting together. I don't know if you appreciate quite how monumental it is, frankly. We welcome the opportunity to talk to an informed public about the important issue before you, which is what information do we have currently and how shall we proceed to protect ourselves and our families when it comes to what we know about non-ionizing radiation. And I will introduce briefly who I am and who Environmental Health Trust is. I direct a nonprofit think tank Its chairman is Hugh Taylor, who is the chairman of OBGYN at Yale Medical School. And it includes a number of distinguished members of the board, including Frank Clegg, the former chair of Microsoft Canada. Our distinguished executive director will be speaking with you in a moment, and she is a truly expert on what is happening in the United States and around the world as communities grapple with the need to provide telecommunications in a way that is safer for all of our residents. And I want to stress that we really haven't heard much about children here today. But just as Blake Levitt told you about the vulnerability of trees and bees, please remember that we do a lot to protect our kids. We give them seatbelts and we give them special baby carriages and bike helmets. And if you travel with a youngster nowadays, you're carrying a whole armadillo of things that you have to help these children with. Well, the reality is we protect the brain of the child because we know it's special and it's developing fast and it needs that protection. I have a slide here that I'm not going to go over except to tell you that I have been working in science for more than 40 years. And I feel that this is one of the most important underappreciated public health issues that the world faces today. What I want to talk to you now about is the fact that the FCC limits for every single phone and every single device and every single tower have not been changed since 1996. And those limits, as Blake Levitt alluded to, as Dr. Brown indicated, were based on old data set by the Soviets and studies of male monkeys and male rats in the 1980s that were deprived of food and they wanted to see how hungry they had to get. They learned how to use a lever to get food when they were starving, and they wanted to see how hot they would get to stop seeking food when they had already been deprived of food. That was the test, and they measured the temperature of those animals with a rectal probe. And based on that test, the FCC set limits for a 6-minute phone call originally. Those limits did not address chronic biological effects, and they did not address real-world exposures, and they particularly did not address the vulnerability of children nor that of the environment. Now, the DC Court of Appeals actually heard our case when we sued the FCC saying, how can you tell us that standards that were then 25 years old are relevant to current technology? And the US Court of Appeals, the District of Columbia, determined that we were correct and ruled that the FCC's policies on standards for testing phones and other devices were, quote, arbitrary and capricious, and that the testing procedures, particularly as they relate to children and long-term exposures, were a, quote, complete failure. And that's a quote from the court decision. I share with you the fact that the court found that the FCC had failed to provide evidence of properly examining long-term exposure, children's vulnerability, the testimony of people injured by radiation sickness, and impacts to the developing brain and reproductive system. Now, I share this with you because the judge at the beginning may not have been aware of this decision. The fact is, the hands of localities are not tied to knots, and there are options, as you will hear from Theodore Scorado, and you will hear from Mr. Sandry, who is an attorney who formerly lived and worked in Stanford and can tell you what the story is about what's going on with regulation today. There's no question that we evolved as part of the electromagnetic spectrum, but the levels of exposure today are literally trillions of trillions times more than they were when life first evolved. And I want to make sure you understand this. Right now, you, if you wanted to, as a municipality, cannot purchase insurance to protect you from damages that might occur from towers that you could build or any other wireless exposures that might be created. Since 1997, Lloyd's of London has refused to cover any health damages from electromagnetic fields. And In 2019, before the pandemic, Swiss Re had a private consulting group advise it, and they declared that 5G was off the leash and uninsurable, the same category that was once occupied by asbestos. When it comes to what we do know about radio frequency radiation and DNA damage, studies have been done, not in the United States, I should add, on DNA in persons residing close to base stations, such as the ones you will be soon asked to approve. And those base stations, it was found that they had a control group of people who lived more than 300 meters away, approximately 1,300 feet, and those who lived within 80 meters. Within 80 meters, meaning approximately 250 feet. And what they found was that people who lived closer to those towers had significant increased damage in their bloodstream. In their bloodstream, I want to stress. This is not a survey asking people whether they had headaches. This was an actual demonstration of blood effects. And there were a number of biochemical markers in the blood that were found to be elevated, consistent with what we call degenerative processes, inflammatory processes, the same kinds of things that are thought to be precursors to cancer, including DNA damage. The majority of research on cell phone radiation has in fact shown damage from that frequencies that we study. Radio frequency radiation increases oxidative effects. Free radicals are formed, and these can have been associated with a whole host of genetic and neurological damage. And these studies, this was a publication in the Journal of the American Medical Association that confirmed that the majority of research in this field does find positive effects. This is one study that was done modeling what 5G exposures will be if this was Austin, Texas. The map on your left here with the green and red shows you what the current exposure is with the LTE network. And that involves towers that are located generally tall on buildings and away from people. That is what they're supposed to be located. If 5G were to be implemented in Austin, you see on the right with all of the red, the indication of how much greater the exposure will be. And based on this study, which was published by the IEEE, which is the Professional Electrical Engineers, this study said that 5G mobile networks cannot yet be classified as safe. And that study was among many that was ignored by the FCC. If you look at this imaging here, this is the virtual family, which is used in medicine today to set standards for surgery and for testing of devices. You can see by the greater absorption of the yellow and red in the child, a child will absorb much more radiation than an adult. And think about that if you had bombardment with multiple 5G beamforming antennas. This is a simulation of the absorption into the brain and eyes of the child. As you look at this video, you'll see that the yellow is moving into the eyes and into the frontal lobe of this 6-year-old. And I can assure you the exposure into the child is in fact much greater, as you might imagine, than the adult. The children have thinner skulls, they absorb more radiation, they're growing more quickly, their brains contain more fluid, and for all of those reasons, they will absorb more. Now, because insects were mentioned before by Blake Levitt, I want to just share with you this paper that was published in 2018 that shows what she was talking about. On the far right side, you see the far greater absorption into the body of the honeybee with the higher frequencies, and this frequency in the middle and the left are the frequencies to the right, rather, the frequencies that will be involved with 5G. So people, insects are deeply concerned about the prospect of that exposure. This is Connecticut. You have a great senator here. And I will leave you this quote from Senator Blumenthal from 2019, where he said, "I believe the American people deserve to know what the health effects are We are flying blind here.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, as far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What happens when thousands of these cells begin appearing near schools, community centers, homes,
Girl room.
and workplaces? And what happens to the workers who are up there repairing them? What happens to the folks who are walking by them every day, school children? And the younger the children, the more susceptible to the radio frequencies they may be.
And we echo that view. And now I will conclude, if I may, with this. This is an image from 1994 when the 7 CEOs of the largest American tobacco companies swore before Congress that there was no evidence linking tobacco with poor health. And now I want you to see this scene that I'm going to show you, hopefully, from a movie that was shown in 2004 called Thank You for Smoking.
So be straight with me. Is it true?
It could be. No,
Well,
come on.
very few
No
cases.
proof
There
at
was
all.
unfortunately an incident out in Iowa. Look, gentlemen, practice these words in front of the mirror. Although we are constantly exploring the subject, currently, there is no direct evidence that links cell phone usage to brain cancer.
Fucking
Now,
crazy.
I'm a brain cancer epidemiologist, it so happens, and a toxicologist. And I can tell you this.
We'll stop it
Study-
right there. We're going to add a little bit in there. A grow facility with thousands of lights, Bluetooth enabled, Wi-Fi enabled, and a worker working underneath it for 8 to 12 hours. Some could be female and pregnant. So, yeah, an EMF level and a dirty electricity should be on every freaking grow light, right?
Seeing brain cancer is very difficult, and it's not something that's easily done. And the issue of brain cancer and cell phones will not be scientifically resolved in my lifetime. But we already know, as you've heard from Dr. Brown, and you will hear from others here, that cell phone radiation and tower radiation damages DNA, increases reactive oxygen species, and causes a host of effects that have been demonstrated to impair public environment. I urge you to consider this as you move ahead in your deliberations. And I thank you again for having the wisdom and the courage to take on this issue.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much as good as you can get. Why should there be an EMF level on your grow light and dirty electricity? I think I pretty much wrapped it all up. From the creation of autistic children to the damaging, irreversible effects that you just heard. Not from me, but from scientists. From a doctor who has a practice that 50% of it is autistic children. You figure if there is something fishy going on, figure someone would say something, right? Well, you have environmental health trust that you just watched, and trust me, there is plenty of data there. You have France, plus many other countries that already have limitations on schools and daycare centers on Wi-Fi. Your grow light is not safe. Thanks for joining.